My name is Chris Kapreski. I'm an undergraduate at Emory University, and I work with Dr. Krishnan's research team, which is partnered with the amazing support group here. Our research team, we focus on patient-centered outcomes research. So some topics that we study include comparing effectiveness of rehab following stroke across various settings, the management of caregiver burden following neurological conditions, and the prevention and early detection of secondary complications following stroke. So I'd like I'd like to now introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Marianne Wetherill, who is the Assistant Professor of Communication Sciences and Disorders, is a speech language pathologist of over 25 years in medical settings, including inpatient acute care, inpatient rehabilitation, outpatient rehabilitation, home health, skilled nursing, and the VA hospital. Her primary clinical responsibilities have included evaluation and treatment of patients with dysphagia and neurologically based communication disorders. So please welcome Dr. Wetherill to the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. Before I start with my slides, yes, my name is Marianne, and I am, this is my 29th year as a speech pathologist, actually. And I know it's been a really long time, and but I have loved every minute of it, and I cannot believe that it's gone so fast. So I just want to say that I really think that your group here is going to be successful, Roger, because you've got so many great ideas, and I really, I loved what you said in your email that you sent out about the meeting, just about about the mission to be involved and be engaged and things like that. And when you were talking about men in particular, that is something that there is a history of men, particularly after strokes and brain injuries and things like that, when they're really have something catastrophic like that affects their ability to function, that they tend to shut off and back out of social opportunities and things like that. And so I think you're doing some really, really great things. And I'll give you a couple quick stories, and then I'll start the presentation. So way back in my past, I started a support group for a hospital that I worked for. And we did a weekly group, and we practiced, and it was more like a practice / support group. We had some fun and did some practice and things like that. And that group just developed such a great bond. And outside of our group meetings, they would go bowling, they would go out to dinner. They started out as a group of strangers and ended up like a group of family. They were so tight, and I think it really helped them all to kind of stretch and kind of regain some of their own independence and those things that they really enjoyed doing. So definitely, this is a great place to be, and so I commend you for your mission and your hard work, and I know it's going to be successful because you guys already have just a really great feel in your group. So when we were having our discussion, when I was listening to all your discussion, I was also thinking about how we are all, I think that we tend to be hardest on ourselves, right? When there's something that we struggle with, whether it's before or after a brain injury or stroke, I think for the most part, we tend to be our own worst critic. And I have a little story about that. So I worked with this lady who had a stroke, and when she came to see me, she could say, "Oh dear, oh honey, oh my," and I'm not kidding you, that was all she could say. And we worked, we did therapy, and we worked for a while doing therapy. It was a long time ago, I can't quite remember, but this lady was getting ready to discharge, and she was still having some problems, but she was doing a lot better. And she was actually new to our community. She had been married for many, many, many years, living in another community. Her husband had passed away. So kind of at this insistence of her family, her daughter and her kids, they encouraged her to retire and move to this new community. And lo and behold, before she ever even unpacked, she had a stroke. So she then now had no support system other than her daughter and her daughter's husband and kids. So So we were looking at discharging, and I really wanted her to be involved in something. And so I talked to her daughter, and the two of us kind of worked together, and we asked her if she'd like to volunteer in our office. She had worked in a medical office before, so she came and worked in our rehab department in our office. And she'd come in a couple afternoons a week, and she would I'd come in, I'd see her, and I'd say, "Hi, how you doing? What's going on?" And she would tell me what she's been going on, what she's been doing, and that she went to see her daughter, and she would tell me a whole story. I mean, like a complete story with most pretty much all the words in there. And then, but at the end, she always wrapped up with, "But oh honey, I just can't say a thing today." And I think she always felt like it was different. And and I think that she perceived that difference as something that other people saw, but really she knew that she was struggling a little bit, but none of us knew it. And so I want you guys to think about giving yourselves a break too, because you're probably doing better than you think you are a lot of the times. So okay, so now I'm gonna share the screen. Okay, we'll take this PowerPoint here. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little bit more to my introduction. So actually, I am now a part-time instructor at the University of West Georgia, and my full-time job is with the Atlanta VA. And I work in the Research and Development Department at the Center for Visual and Neurocognitive Rehabilitation. So let me get my slides going here. There we go. So I'm going to talk to you about helping the brain help itself. And we're going to talk a little bit about some things that you can do and think about. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on at the CV&R. So to introduce you to the Rehab and Development Center for Visual and Neurocognitive Rehabilitation at the Atlanta VA, we are only one of 13 rehab research and development centers in the nation. So here in Atlanta, we have a huge research program, and our research program is really open to veterans and non-veterans. And we also have projects going for people that have of all abilities. So we have healthy adult projects, and we have projects for people with other kinds of things that they're dealing with. And so really the mission is to improve health and quality of life in visual and cognitive disorders, but we are also engaged in these academic alliances with Georgia State, with Emory, with Georgia Tech, and with Morehouse. So we have investigators from all of those universities as part of our department. And again, we have studies for people of all abilities, and veterans and non-veterans from the ages of 18 to 89. So we don't have anything for people under 18, and we are in our center, we are not doing research with people over 89 at this time. So we have some exercise studies, some brain studies, and our research registry. So I want to talk briefly about our research registry. Our research registry is an opportunity for you to put yourself on a list. If you might be interested, or someone you know might be interested in participating in research, now or in the future, the research registry is a great way to just get your name on the list. And then if there's a project that comes up that you might be a good fit for, then the researchers have the opportunity to contact you. So it's a good way to get involved if that's something that you're interested in. It doesn't obligate you to participate in any research. And if you sign up for the registry and you change your mind and you decide you don't want to be part of it, then you can take your name off the list. So it's a free opportunity. There's no obligation. And so if you're all interested in participating in any research studies, I would encourage you to join our registry. At the CV&R, we do have a lot of treatment studies, And I think for the most part, yes. So you don't have to be a veteran to join the registry. You don't have, you can be anybody between the ages of 18 and 89. So yeah. Yes. And a lot of our research that we're doing is open to veterans and non-veterans. So we do have a variety of different kinds of projects going on. We have a lot of different researchers are actually, I've been now with the CVNR since August, so not very long. And it's amazing to me. I had no idea how much research happens here in Atlanta at the VA hospital. All right, so we're going to talk really quickly here about helping the brain help itself, because really what we're trying to do is get involved in our lives and be successful at what we want to do, right? So I'm going to give you a little rundown of the brain basics, and then we'll talk about neuroplasticity, goal setting, and kind of get started. So if we are just generally talking about the brain, because this is so much more complex than what I have to share with you today. We could talk about this for months. So very, very generally speaking, just a quick rundown. So our frontal lobe of our brain is in blue, and that's really where we hold our intention, our initiation, our execution. So our ability to get things started and get things done. It's where our speech and language live, and also some of our working memory. And this brain that we're looking at right here is the left. We're looking at the left side of the brain. And what's important about the left side of the brain is it also tends to be the home for speech and language for people too. So our parietal lobe is yellow on this picture, and it is tends to be related to sensation and sensory interpretation. And our temporal lobe is the green area on this brain picture, and it tends to hold hearing and language comprehension and some of our memory functions. So we have a couple more. Our occipital lobe is in red, and it tends to be our vision related functions and interpretation of visually transmitted information. And then our cerebellum and our brainstem are different, actually separate structures, but they're both listed in white, and they are related to our ability to move and refine our movement, but they're also related to a lot of our really basic functions, and are very, very critical in things like swallowing in particular. Have a lot of our swallowing center is in that area. So it's very important for things that are related to our basic functioning for sure. So neuroplasticity, there we go. Okay, so neuroplasticity forms the basis for most of the research that we conduct at the CVNR, and it is important to the recovery process. So let's talk about what that is exactly. Oops, there we go. Okay. So neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to adapt, and nerve cells can change in structure and function, and they change as a mechanism or because of new learning, and they also change because of relearning after loss of function. So there are some important principles of neuroplasticity that we're going to talk about here. But basically, neuroplasticity happens like this. We learn something, or we have an experience, and it's something that typically we do over and over. We get lots of practice with it, and it creates, it kind of sparks this neuroplasticity where the connections in the brain maybe are reconnecting or strengthening their connections or growing new connections, which is part of our brain change. And then as our brain changes, then our ability to function can change. So we'll talk about what is neuroplasticity and how we can tap into it. So I really, really love this. This is one of my favorite articles about neuroplasticity, and they talk about how you can use it or lose it. I think most of you've probably heard that before. We can use it and improve it, which means we can do something and get better at it. A repetition and intensity matters. And this is really a key component to neuroplasticity. Repetition and intensity mean that you are going to be practicing something a lot over and over. And then time matters, age matters. It needs to be specific and salient. And then we'll talk about transference and interference here in just a minute. We're going to break these all down. So use it or lose it. We know to maintain a function or skill, you need to use the function or skill. So if you don't use that function or skill, that part of the brain in charge of that function may lose ability. So it is almost part of the idea of, you did something as a child, you were really, really good at it, or as a younger person, and then maybe you didn't do it for 10 years, and then you go back to doing it, and you're just not quite as good at it. So, but then you practice and you work on it again, and you start to develop those skills again. So strengthening that function. Then we have use it and improve it. So you can, if you want to improve a function or skill, you need to use it. So the way that we do this is by practice, practice, practice all the time. So when you're talking earlier, Roger, about being involved in things with your group, absolutely. And that's why it's important to be participating in these different groups, why it's important to make sure that you're engaged with your family and your community, because every time you talk is a chance to practice, is what I tell my speech clients. But it's the same thing if you have difficulty with word finding, if you have difficulty with memory, the more you use it, the more you're practicing, the better it is for you. Okay, so you want to be involved in activities that use that skill. So it's great if you want to practice, with something that's different than that, but likely you're going to be strengthening that different skill rather than the skill that you really want to use. So I tell people it's like this. If you want to walk, right, you practice walking. You don't just practice lifting your foot off the floor while you're sitting in the chair. If you only do that, you're going to be really good at picking your foot off the floor, but you're not going to be so good at walking. So you really need to practice those things that you want to gain function or skill at. So, and then again, repetition and intensity matters. So you want to do it again and again, over and over every day. So again, if you want to talk, think about every time you talk as a chance to practice. You can't, this again, groups like this are great because you do have a chance to practice talking with people that really understand, and will give you a break if it takes you a minute to get the words to come out or get to put your ideas together. You can't just sit back and say, okay, I'll talk in a group when I can talk, or I'll talk in a group when I can put my ideas together. You know what? Talking in that group is practice putting your ideas together. It's practice being able to talk. So it's part of the way toward your solution. So, and time matters. So if you want to improve a skill, you want to start working on it sooner rather than later. You want to maximize early periods of recovery. And by starting early, working on the things you want to have as skills in the way you want them to be, then you reduce some of those learning strategies that might ultimately be bad habits that hold you back. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later here in a minute. So yes, age matters. So many years ago, they really believed that neuroplasticity was something that happened to younger brains. So it's something that we can see actively occurring when somebody, maybe in a child, if you're watching your child develop, and maybe early on they're using both hands equally, but then later on they develop their hand preference. And so that is you can see the brain kind of shaping at that point. You can see that the different parts of the brain are kind of forming their own kind of their own functions, and some of those kind of lines between what this part of the brain does and what that part of the brain does are kind of getting formed. So yes, younger brains tend to have more plasticity, tend to have different kind of plasticity than older brains, but older brains can still change. So even as an adult, even though maybe those early periods of rapid change are over, you can still make a difference. You can still strengthen those connections in your brain. So it is very, very important that you make sure that you continue to address them. So how do we do that? Again, by practicing things that we want to improve. Make sure that it's specific, and make sure that the goal has value to you. And that's a really, really important part of this whole big picture, because if you're practicing something that doesn't have value to you, it will be harder for your body or for you in your brain to internalize that and do it well, because it won't have that value. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. She's not happy that she's not being included in our meeting today. So the last of these principles of neuroplasticity that I want to talk to you about are transference and interference. So transference is the ability to learn and then use that learning for new purposes. So like generalizing. So if you learn a skill, let's say you practice it at home, and then you say, you know what, now I want to go out and I want to have a conversation with someone at my Bible study group, or at my coffee group, or whatever things that you want to be involved in. And maybe that was a challenge for you in the beginning, but because you've practiced it a lot, now you can take it out and use it in those places that you really want to be able to use it. So that is really the key. I mean, being able to do something just inside your own four walls or just inside the therapy room doesn't really get you any place. You need to be able to get out and use it other places. And that's why you're practicing these things. So, and then interference is when something learned interferes with new learning. So this is like if you've learned a bad habit as a compensatory strategy. So an example might be for somebody who has a lot of trouble finding the right words, and maybe they always start their sentence with, I don't know, because in the beginning, it was kind of all they could say. And maybe that was kind of their only way of expressing themselves. So they said, I don't know a lot. But then now when they can say what they want to say, they still start out with, I don't know. So that would be a bad habit that's now interfering with their ability to move forward and say the things that they want to say in the way they want to say them. I hope that makes sense. So how do we start applying this? So again, to get better or to improve any skill, you need to do it, right? And you need to start by setting a goal. If you say, you know what, I just want to do better overall, you know what, that is great. But by setting a specific goal, you can then improve your motivation, your ability to stick with it, and actually feel some great achievement when you finish that goal. So you know that you've done something, you know you're getting somewhere. It's not just, wow, you know, I really want to do better, but I don't really feel like I'm doing better, even though you might be. So I want you to think about using SMART goals, but there are lots of different ways to set goals. This is just one theory, but I like it. I think that it makes a lot of sense. Your goals need to be specific. So you need to say, I want to do XYZ, whatever that thing is, and you want to be able to measure it. So measuring doesn't mean I want to be able to do it 10 times, but it could be, I want to be able to do it once, or I'll know that I have achieved my goal because I can see that I can now do whatever it is that you measure. So having it be measurable is really important to understand that you've achieved it, and to get that sense of reward that helps to drive you forward, to continue to work towards your goals and not get discouraged. Because again, this kind of came up in the discussion before this presentation. You know, when you have these catastrophic changes in your life, or a lot of sudden change, it can really affect your thought process. And depression is a major factor that holds people back. So you want to be able to support yourself and your sense of achievement to help you move forward, and feel good about that you really are making progress and you really are getting somewhere towards your goals. Your goals do need to be realistic. So if you have a big goal, let's say you have a really large goal, maybe right now you're not working, but you really want to go back to work, you know, your goal could be realistic if you break it down and really start by addressing those components that you need to get to that larger place. But going back to work right now might not be realistic. So you might need to set smaller, more realistic goals that take you step by step towards that larger place that you want to be. And then time bound. So you don't want to say, oh, someday I want to be able to do this. You want to be able to say, you know what, next month I want to be able to do this. Or, you know, one of my goals is every day I'm going to practice X, or whatever it is. You know, you are setting a goal, you're making it specific, and you are doing something to make sure that you hold yourself accountable with it. So how do we get started? Getting started sometimes is the hardest part. You can set lots of goals, and then you go, oh, you know, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't even know where to start. So you know what? If you don't know where to start by thinking about what's holding you back. So, and if you can identify those things, maybe you can find a way around them. You know, sometimes people have difficulty with access to whatever it is that they're trying to get to. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it has to do with time. A huge issue for people who have intentions to do things, but maybe you have difficulty with carryover for healthcare, is support from other people. So definitely being part of a group like this is a great place to start if it is where you're starting. If it's but it's also something to incorporate into your life, you know, as an ongoing basis. But support from your friends and your family, you want to continue to nurture those relationships. You know, I know that it's hard, and sometimes you know, you can't have a conversation like maybe you're used to with your friends, but you know what, you really need to try to keep a hold of those people that care about you, because you know, they care about you, and that support will help you to move forward, and it help you with your emotional barriers too, if you're having struggling with depression or things like that. Now, if you are struggling with depression, you also need to make sure that you get the medical care that you're supposed to have, or that you need to have for that. That is also really an important part of it. So connecting with others, again, connect with others that can inspire you, or connect with others that can understand what you're going through, connect with others that can just, you know, make you laugh and give you a better day. Just connect with others. Definitely. You can't do this alone. And celebrate your small successes. You know what? When you've taken that first step, you probably celebrated. When you ate that first meal, you probably celebrated. You know, I think somebody just said they got cleared to drive. You know what? I bet you're celebrating. So celebrate those successes. So if we're going to be working towards our goals, we want to set our goals that has sufficient value to you and a level of challenge. That challenge helps you to keep working at it. So, for example, if you start something and you go, wow, this is just too easy, I've mastered it and I don't want to do it anymore, then you need to advance it. You need to move it forward. I don't know about you guys, but I've had different things in my life where I've been like, wow, you know what? Yeah, I started out with this puzzle game, but now it's too easy for me. So I don't want to do it anymore. So you know what? I need to move on to something that's more challenging. You want to identify your steps to achieve your goal. Break it down into those smaller steps. Start now. Remember, time matters. And then practice, 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 practice. Use that skill where you need to use it, how you need to use it, so you can develop those connections in your brain and strengthen those connections in your brain that can help you to move forward with your goal. So, that was a little bit about neuroplasticity, but I want to talk to you briefly about some of the studies we have going on at the CV&R. If any of you are interested in any of these studies, or you know someone who would benefit, they are based on principles of neuroplasticity. And I'm going to give you just a quick rundown here of what some of these are. And then I'm actually going to tell you one more story about somebody I worked with that I think will be kind of inspiring too. So, okay. So one of our studies that we're doing here is our intention treatment for anomia. And what it is actually is looking at if we use the we're looking at if intensive short-term treatment works better than a less intensive treatment given over a longer period of time for word finding. So we're looking at dosage, and we're also looking to see who can benefit from this treatment. What's really interesting about it is that it uses a cognitive-based method. So it uses the intention system of the brain to execute or to help start the production of words. And when people have aphasia, when people have difficulty finding those words that they want to say, you know, it's that it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't say it. That's a main thing that people with aphasia tell me. So it's how can we address aphasia, maybe through a back door. So the intention system supports the brain by assisting with word selection and initiation. And if we have problems with intention, it can result in word retrieval impairments. So we're using a different part of the brain than we typically think of for this study. It's using a circular left-hand movement to engage the intention areas in the right side of the brain. So in this sense, we are trying to use function or kind of borrow function from a part of the brain that might be working better to help us get started in that area that may be struggling. So, and it also helps us to expand to production of other words. So rather than learning a specific set of words. So some of you might have done speech therapy and you might have practiced a specific list of words and you get really good at that list of words, but then when you go to do new words that are not on that list, you might struggle. So we're looking to see if this is a way around that problem. So we are really just looking to see what happens. Okay. Yes, and our intention study, actually we're using a functional MRI during part of that study too. So we're actually doing treatment in our treatment clinic, but we're actually looking at the brain and how the brain changes. So with that study. So we are not, to do research, you have to approach it with an open mind. So maybe it will help, maybe it won't help. But we want to know if it will. There is already some research in this area that says that it can. So we are working on developing that research. But that's a good question. And that's typically how that's typically what a study is like. So you might come into it with a goal of, you know what, I want to see this improve. And but we don't know. We're looking at different things. But for the intention study, we're also looking at dosage. Can someone make the same progress in a shorter period of time or a longer period of time? So so we're looking at that too. So this one is, this is our transcranial direct stimulation as an adjuvant to phonomotor treatment for aphasia study. So I know that's a lot of big words. Let me explain it. So what we're looking for is, does adding brain stimulation boost the brain for faster therapy progress? So what we are doing is we are using what's called phonomotor therapy, and it is a technique that is used for people that have aphasia. And then now we're adding to it, because we want to see if we add that electrical stimulation to the brain, if it can make therapy, if it can make the process happen better, faster, you know, what it can do to that process. And then we're using neuroimaging to see how people recover differently. So again, using the fMRI. So the phonomotor treatment, which is the way that we're addressing language in this study, is based on the concept that spoken words, that production of spoken words is dependent upon our knowledge of sound sequences. So we're looking at some of those things that underlie language rather than the words themselves. So an example is like, we understand that most words don't start with a combination of letters in English, like NG, or you're probably not going to see a word in English that starts like with the letter L and then the letter K and then the letter Z. I mean, we understand as we learn language that there's a system for putting those pieces of our words together. So it works a little bit on that system, a little bit more so. So, and then it adds this transcranial direct stimulation. So, and it is basically adding a little bit of electrical current with a little machine through electrodes placed in specific areas of the brain. So, so it has the potential to enhance aphasia outcomes, and it is something that has had some positive research behind it already. So actually none of our studies are starting like from the ground up where we're saying, oh, I wonder if this works at all. We're building on things that already have some basis out there. So we are using technology in our studies, but we're not using any of our any technology to like produce the words. Now, what we are doing in the previous study, in this intention study, we are actually putting the people in the fMRI machine, and they will be naming words while they're in the machine, so we can see how their brain is working at the same time. So that's one way that we're using the technology. So it's a little bit different. I think that you're using it in a little different way, but not to say that it's not something that couldn't be done or isn't being done somewhere, but it's not what we're doing. Oh, and then our last study that I want to touch on here is our PRISM adaptation and left brain stroke rehabilitation. And so basically, PRISM adaptation is a use of glasses that have different kinds of thickness to help basically shape where your vision looks. So it's So we're looking at if we can use this prism adaptation method to help people with vision, like visual field problems where they have neglect, where they're not looking at part of the thing in their picture. I'll show you. So like an example would be something like this. If you ask someone to draw a clock and they only draw a clock on half the page because they have this spatial neglect, or their brain is not recognizing the items on the other side. And it could be left side or right side, depending upon which side of the brain is impacted. So for something like this to happen, the person would have to have damage on the right side of the brain. So we're looking at if we use these glasses that have glass that's shaped in such a way that it moves the way you see things. If it helps you, if people with aphasia can learn to use this system, and how we need to adapt this system, which is also something that's been tested, how we can adapt it for people with aphasia, because the spatial neglect is it's a little bit different for people with aphasia, because they're missing things on the right side, whereas we see a lot of spatial neglect, and a lot of people get treatment for spatial neglect who have damage on the right side of their brain. So it's that idea, like if you're walking and you accidentally keep walking into a wall on that side, or if you're in your wheelchair and you keep running into the wall, or those are some examples of how you might see that happen in the world, like functionally. So our PAT treatment is a 10-day spatial training regimen. And again, where spatial function is also related to other functional brain areas. And we're looking to see if by spatial retraining, if we can kind of go again through another part of the brain, address some motor recovery in a different way. So getting the brain, again, a part of the brain maybe that's working better to help a part of the brain that's maybe not working as well. And so here's my contact information. And again, we also have the research registry, which I talked about earlier. And if you are interested in any of these studies or interested in participating in our registry at all, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can call me, you can email me, you can let Roger know, and he can pass your contact information along, any of that. We would love to have every one of you sign up if you're interested. So, and then here's information about our center and our website address, and the number here on this page. Also, I check this phone too. So if you call this number, you can also reach me. It's a direct number to our department. And this number is my direct number to my office. So, and then I've listed the references for you. And most of these studies have been done by people that are in our department, or a lot of them have been. So, okay.